I came back to Kingston 11 days early, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon in November, with a duffel bag full of gear that smelled like tundra, and a connection through Winnipeg I'd been too tired to cancel in time to warn anyone. The front door of my rental on Frontenac Street was unlocked. I stood on the step for a second, key already in my hand, not quite understanding. Then I pushed it open and the smell hit me. Lentil soup, the good kind, with cumin and that particular warmth that only comes from something simmered too long on a low burner. Music from the kitchen, something acoustic and low, and someone singing along just barely, just the shape of the melody. Verity. I dropped my duffel by the door, without thinking, and walked toward the kitchen. She was standing with her back to me at the stove, wearing my old Queen's University hoodie, the gray one with the cracked lettering I'd had since second year and should have thrown out twice by now. Her hair was up in that loose way she did it when she was concentrating. She had a wooden spoon in one hand and something that looked like a tube of Kraft spackle in the other, which was not a normal combination. I said her name. Verity spun around so fast the spoon clattered against the pot. Her eyes went wide. Then she looked at the spackle in her hand, looked at me, and said, very clearly and very calmly, "Don't go into the spare room. I want you to understand something. I had spent 6 weeks in Churchill, Manitoba shooting polar bears on the Hudson Bay coast for a conservation organization called the Barren Ground Project. I had waded through November slush in 29 degrees Celsius. I had shared a research station bunkhouse with 4 other people and a heater that worked about 60% of the time. I was exhausted in a way that had gone past exhaustion into something quieter and more structural. And I was standing in my own kitchen, in my own apartment, watching my friend hold Kraft spackle like evidence. Why, I said, are you holding that? Self-defense. Against what? Honestly, you. I looked around. The kitchen was clean. Not my kind of clean, which was dishes washed but surfaces left to their own devices, but actually clean, the kind where the backsplash looks like someone made a decision about it. My stack of old film canisters, which had been living on the counter since August, in the general shape of an avalanche, had been sorted into a shoebox with a label I could read from 6 feet away. Developed on one side, undeveloped on the other. I had a lot of undeveloped film. You were supposed to be gone until the 28th, Verity said. The organization ran out of funding for the last 2 weeks. Weather window closed early anyway. I set my keys down. I texted you from Winnipeg. My phone is in the spare room. Of course it is. I've been in flow. Verity. She winced at my tone. That was when I noticed she wasn't just caught off guard. She was genuinely scared. Not panicked. Just carefully scared. The kind where she was already sorting through what she was going to say and in what order. I'd seen that look before. Once, outside a Timmy's on Princess Street, when she'd told me her contract with her main client had just ended and she was trying to say it like it was fine when it clearly wasn't. I had hated that look then. I hated it now. Are you okay? I asked. Her shoulders came down from where they'd been braced. Verity did not respond well to jokes when she was cornered. She responded badly and thoroughly, but if you asked her a straight question, she went quiet in a way that meant she was deciding whether to trust you with the real answer. I'm fine, she said. I just really need you not to go into the spare room yet. Yet. Yes. There's a yet. There has always been a yet. So at some point, I'll be permitted to enter a room of my own apartment. She set the spackle down on the counter with the careful precision of someone buying time. I was going to have it done before you got back. I looked at the spackle again. I looked at her. She had white residue on her left thumb. There was a paint smear I hadn't noticed before on the hem of my hoodie, just above the front pocket. How long, I said, has this been going on? Define going on. Verity. She opened her mouth. The soup started bubbling too hard, and she spun back to the stove, grateful. I heard her turn down the heat. She kept her back to me for a moment longer than she needed to. I'm Rory Gallagher, 27 years old, Kingston, Ontario. Freelance documentary photographer, which in practical terms means I own 3 cameras worth more than my car. I have a line of credit that has seen some things. And every 6 months or so, someone calls me with a project that sounds important and pays barely enough, but I always say yes, because the alternative is sitting in this apartment watching my skills go soft. The Churchill assignment had been 6 weeks with the Barren Ground project, shooting their fieldwork on sea ice timing and polar bear condition scores. I'd sent back about 4,000 frames. Good work. The kind I'd wanted to be doing since I was 19 years old, looking at NFB documentary photography books in the Queen's Library and thinking, that is what a life should look like. Verity had asked me, the week before I left, whether the project was funded properly or whether I was doing it for exposure again. I had said it was funded properly. It was mostly funded properly. She had given me a look that meant she knew. I'd been trying to think of reasons to call her from Churchill that weren't obviously about missing her. I managed about 4 of them. Each time, she picked up before the second ring, and she never once said, "I told you so" about the budget. "You made soup," I said. "You don't have any real food. You had dried pasta and half a jar of peanut butter." I was going to grocery shop. "You were going to get back from Churchill and immediately apply for the next assignment and forget to grocery shop until the Thursday after you got home." She wasn't wrong. I'd already opened the Barren Ground Project's follow-up email twice on the plane. "Verity," I said, quieter now, "what did you do to the spare room?" She turned around again. The soup was fine. She just needed something to do with her hands. She pulled my hoodie sleeves down over her wrists, which she did when she was working, through something, and she looked at me for a long moment. Something I should have asked permission for. That's not reassuring. No, but it's accurate. From the spare room, something bumped against the wall, not loudly. Just once, the way a chair leg hits a baseboard when someone shifts their weight. I looked at the hallway, then at Verity. "Is there someone in my spare room?" "Murray is almost certainly done." "Murray. He's my neighbor's dad. He does handyman work. He is very trustworthy and has an excellent track record with wall anchors." I stepped toward the hallway. Verity moved sideways, putting herself between me and the hall, not dramatically. She just shifted into the path and pressed 2 fingers against my chest, lightly, the way you'd stop someone from walking into traffic. It stopped me completely. Her fingers were warm through my shirt. Her eyes were too close. The spare room mystery suddenly became less interesting than the fact that Verity was standing 3 inches from me after 6 weeks and she wasn't moving away and neither was I. Then she realized her hand was still on my chest and she took it back. "Sorry," she said. "Don't be." She looked up at me. Something shifted in her face. Then Murray knocked twice from the spare room, the universal signal of a man who has completed a task and would like acknowledgement. "Murray," Verity called, "you can go out the back." "Left the level on the windowsill," Murray called back. "That's fine. Also, I think the thermostat is set too low. It's November." Murray. Leaving, gone, never here. We listened to his footsteps cross the spare room, heard the back door open and close. The apartment went quiet again. Verity turned back to the stove. She ladled soup into a bowl, without asking whether I wanted it, and set it on the counter. Because she knew I'd rather eat standing up when I first got home, the same way she knew I kept the good kitchen scissors in the drawer with the takeout menus, and not with the actual utensils. She knew me the way you know someone when you've spent enough Tuesday evenings in the same kitchen that the ordinary details just accumulate without announcement. I'd met Verity 10 months ago on the worst morning of that January. My car wouldn't start. Not a weak start. A dead, total this battery has made its final decision start. I'd been standing in the parking lot behind my building at 7:15 in the morning, 28 degrees Celsius, breath coming out in sheets, trying to figure out whether to call a tow or just sit inside until the feeling came back to my fingers. Her car pulled in 2 spots over. She got out, looked at me, looked at my car, and said, "I've got cables." We got it started. I offered to buy her coffee. She said she was already late for a client call, but she could do 20 minutes. We sat in the Tim Hortons on Division Street for 2.5 hours. I was 45 minutes late to a meeting, and I didn't care at all. We'd been friends since then, Easy friends. The kind where you don't have to explain the context of things, where she could text me a screenshot of a terrible client brief at 11 p.m. and I'd respond with exactly one word and she'd know I understood. I had spent 6 weeks in the subarctic, carefully not asking myself why I kept looking for things to tell her. You haven't eaten anything today, she said. It wasn't a question. I had a granola bar in Winnipeg. That's not food, eat. I ate. She stood across from me near the stove and pretended to be interested in the soup she'd already finished making. At some point, our elbows were both resting on the same counter, and neither of us moved away. Why didn't you ask me before you did anything to the spare room? I said. Because you would have said no. Probably. And then I would have done it anyway. Probably not. Her mouth curved. Okay, maybe not. I set the spoon down. Verity. Yes. Give me one honest reason not to walk in there right now. She looked at the hallway, then at me. Her expression changed, the way it changed when she wasn't going to be funny anymore. Because if you see it before I'm ready, she said, you'll know exactly how I feel about you. The kitchen went very quiet. Outside, a city bus went by. Someone on the street laughed about something. The radiator clicked the way it always did when the heat came on. Verity. I know, she said. I know how that sounds. What did you do? She exhaled. I had a vision. That is a sentence people say before they do structural damage. I did not do structural damage. She reached for her mug on the counter and held it with both hands. The spare room was just a storage unit you were paying rent on. You know that. 4 boxes you've never opened, 2 tripods with broken legs, and that shelf with all your undeveloped film. I was going to get to those. You've been saying that for 8 months. Film takes time. Rory. One of those canisters had a sticker that said develop ASAP in your own handwriting and it was dated 2 years ago. I tried not to look guilty. I definitely looked guilty. I thought, she said carefully, that while you were gone I could sort it out, make it into an actual editing room. Something you could come home to and use, instead of doing everything at the kitchen table and pretending that's sustainable. She paused. And I had the roles developed. I went very still. All of them. All of them. I had 11 undeveloped rolls of 35mm film in that spare room. Some from years ago. Some from earlier this year. I didn't develop them because I didn't develop them. I always had a reason that made sense at the time and stopped making sense immediately afterward. Verity. Most of them were landscapes, architecture stuff, event work. She was looking at her mug. There was one from about 8 months ago. 8 months ago. 2 months after I met her. What was on it? I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant it. She set her mug down. She looked at me directly, which was how I knew this was the actual thing. A lot of the St. Lawrence in different light. Some street shots around the market. She paused. And about 14 frames of me. I hadn't known I'd done that. Or, I had known, in the way you know things you don't look at directly. I remembered a Sunday in March. Early, the light on the river. Verity had been walking ahead of me on the boardwalk at Confederation Park, talking about a project she was frustrated with, gesturing with her coffee cup, and I'd had the camera out because I always had the camera out, and I had not thought carefully about what I was pointing it at. Rory, she said. I saw those photos. I saw what they looked like. Her voice was steady in the way that meant she was holding it steady, deliberately. And I thought, I know what it means when someone photographs something they can't stop looking at. You taught me that. My chest was doing something I didn't have a clinical word for. I had one of them printed, she said. It's in there, on the wall. From somewhere in the building, a door closed. The radiator clicked again. The soup sat warm on the counter between us. You've been in my spare room for 6 weeks, I said slowly, turning it into an editing room, developing my old film, and hanging a photo of yourself on my wall. That's one interpretation. What's the other interpretation? I was making you a place to come home to. That sentence landed somewhere below my ribs and stayed there. I thought about every apartment I'd come back to after the last 3 assignments. The table covered in mail, The spare room I never went into because it depressed me. The way I always felt, the first night back, like I was just passing through my own life. Verity knew that. I'd told her once, late on a Friday, that I was always somewhere between leaving and landing. And she'd been quiet for a moment and then said, "That sounds exhausting," in a way that meant she understood what I'd left out. I stepped around the counter. She held her ground, but her knuckles went white around the mug. "Why?" I said. She looked at the space between us. "Because you send back beautiful photographs from every place you go. Sea ice at dawn, caribou in fog, old men playing chess in small-town diners." She glanced up. "And then you come back here to a room full of broken tripods and you edit on a kitchen table that wobbles. The table doesn't wobble if you put a coaster under the short leg. That is not the flex you think it is." I almost laughed. She almost did too. "It bothered me," she said quietly. "Not the table. The way you talked about your apartment like it was temporary. Like you were always about to leave and couldn't justify making it matter until you stopped." Her eyes went to the spare room and back. "You're good at being somewhere else," she said. "I wanted you to be good at being here too." My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. We both ignored it. "6 weeks ago," I said, "you stood in that parking lot at the airport and told me to eat actual meals on the plane and text you when I landed. You texted me when you landed. Both times. I noticed." Verity. I was very close now, close enough to see the paint residue on her thumb and the exact way her jaw was set, the way it got when she'd made a decision and was waiting to see what happened next. I spent 6 weeks in Churchill photographing things that mattered, and every time I took a shot I was actually proud of, my first thought was, I want to show this to her. Her breath caught. "Not my editor," I said. "Not my equipment guys, you, every time." She looked at me for a long moment. "That's a lot of data points," she said finally. "I'm a photographer. I notice patterns." Her eyes went soft, in a way I'd only seen once before, and that time I told myself I was reading it wrong. "Rory," her voice was barely above the sound of the radiator. "I'm scared." "I know." "I'm not scared you'll hate the room." "I know that too." "I'm scared you'll love it, and then leave for 3 months to shoot something in Nunavut, and I'll have to figure out what to do with all of this." I thought about the email sitting in my inbox. The Barren Ground Project's follow-up offer. 12 weeks. Good work. Better funding than Churchill. I thought about 14 frames on an 8-month-old roll of film. "I travel for work," I said carefully. "That's not changing." "I know." "But I was in Churchill, and I had good days out on the ice, and I called you from a satellite phone because I needed to tell someone, and you were the someone." I closed the last bit of distance. "That's not nothing, Verity." Her hand came up and grabbed the front of my jacket, not pulling me in, just holding. "If you kiss me right now," she said, "and then take an assignment in Nunavut in January, I'm going to be furious. I'll negotiate the start date." That is not the same thing as a commitment. It's a start. My phone buzzed again, then a third time, insistent. I reached into my pocket. The screen said, D. Hennessy, Barren Ground Project. David Hennessy, my editor. A man who believed every logistical problem could be solved with a 4 a.m. call and the phrase, "we can make it work." I looked at Verity. She looked at my phone, then at me. Then she let go of my jacket. "Answer it," she said. "I don't have to." "Rory," her expression was careful. Not closed, but careful. "If it's a good job, you should answer it." "It is a good job," I said. The follow-up for Churchill, 12 weeks in Nunavut. Something moved across her face that she didn't fully hide. "Then answer it," she said. I answered it. "Rory," Hennessy's voice was the same at 3 p.m. as it was at 4 a.m. "You're back early. Good timing. The Nunavut permit came through." I heard. 12 weeks. February through April. Same rate as Churchill plus 20% for conditions. "I need your answer by the end of the week." I looked at Verity. She was looking at the counter. She had gone back to her mug, and she was not looking at me. "I need a few days," I said. "I just landed." Hennessy made a sound. "By Thursday." "Wednesday. I'll have an answer Wednesday." A pause. "Wednesday." He hung up. Verity still wasn't looking at me. Before you say anything, I said, that's the first time I've ever asked for more than 24 hours. I didn't say anything. You were about to say something very mature and understanding that would have made me feel terrible. Her mouth pressed together. I was going to say that you should take it. I know. It's a good project. It is. And I know who you are, she said. I knew who you were when I got the cables out of my trunk in a 28 parking lot because you looked like someone who was going to stand in the cold until figured it out by himself. She finally looked up. I'm not asking you to stop being that person. What are you asking? She was quiet for a moment. I'm asking you to know what you're coming back to, she said. When you leave, I want you to know. I walked to the spare room door. Rory. I know, I said. Let me see it. She didn't stop me this time. I opened the door. The room I remembered was beige walls, bare bulb, boxes stacked in the corner, both broken tripods leaning against the radiator like they were having a conversation about their failures, the shelf with the canisters, the card table I kept meaning to get rid of. What I was looking at now was not that room. The walls were a dark warm white, the kind that makes natural light look intentional. The card table was gone. In its place was a real desk, solid secondhand, the kind with scratches still in it because the scratches were earned. Against the window with a proper monitor arm and a lamp with a color-accurate bulb. The broken tripods were gone. 3 good shelves held my lenses sorted by focal length, labeled in handwriting that was definitely not mine. My books, photography books, NFB collections, contact sheets I'd printed over the years, were on the bottom shelf in order, not alphabetical. By how often I referenced them somehow, she'd figured that out. Then there were the prints. 4 of them on the walls, framed simply, and I recognized every one. A long exposure of the harbor in winter that I'd shot 3 years ago and never printed because I thought the noise was too much. Mounted and lit properly, the noise looked like texture. It looked like a real photograph. A wide shot of the Churchill Tundra I'd sent her as a test image weeks ago. She'd printed it at a size that made the scale of it land the way it does in person. And on the wall above the desk, the one she'd mentioned. The boardwalk shot, March, the St. Lawrence going silver behind her, the light at that particular angle you only get on an early Sunday when the sun hasn't committed yet. Verity not looking at the camera, Verity looking out at the water, coffee cup mid-gesture, her mouth open on a word. I had taken that photograph without thinking. The way you reach for something. I looked at it for a long time. Verity had come to stand in the doorway. I could feel her there. The print on the left, she said quietly. I found the negative with it. You'd labeled it harbor. Probably junk. I had it printed anyway because I thought you were wrong about it. I was wrong about it. I know. She was looking at the print, not at me. You do that sometimes. Call things junk because you're afraid to want them too much. I turned around. She was holding herself carefully, one hand on the doorframe, braced. Murray installed the shelves, she said. I found the desk on Marketplace for $60. The monitor arm was on clearance at Canada Computers. She said each detail quickly, like a report. I patched the hole by the window myself, which is what the spackle was for. I watched 2 tutorials and it went fine. It'll need a second coat. Verity. I kept all the receipts if you want to. Verity. I'm not done being nervous yet. I know, I'm not asking you to stop. I crossed the room and took her hand where it was gripping the doorframe. She let me. Her fingers were cold. They warmed up. I had a photo on that roll that I didn't know I'd taken, I said. Of you? In the specific light of a specific morning, and I kept the roll undeveloped for 8 months because I didn't want to look too closely at what that meant. She didn't say anything. I know what it meant, I said. Her eyes filled. She looked annoyed at herself about it. I might still take the Nunavut job, I said. I know. But if I do, I'm calling you from whatever satellite phone they give me, and when I come back, I'm coming back to this. I looked at the room, then at her, and to you. She let out a breath that had been in there for a while. That's it, she said. That's the whole speech? I'm better at photos than speeches. That tracks. Do you want a speech? I want you to stop looking at my mouth and just. I kissed her. Not like it was a decision, though it was. Like it was a relief. The way cold gives way to warmth, gradually and then all at once. She made a small sound and grabbed the front of my jacket, and this time she pulled. When we broke apart, she pressed her forehead against mine, and neither of us said anything for a moment. Murray is going to be insufferable about this, she said finally. Does Murray know? Murray installed the photo of me above your desk and said, and I quote, "That's a good one, kid, so yes, Murray knows." I laughed. She did too, and it was a little shaky on both ends. Come eat your soup, she said. It's getting cold. We ate at the kitchen counter like two people who had not just rewritten something between them. Except we kept looking at each other, and then at the spare room doorway and back, and neither of us had anything casual left. I called Hennessy Wednesday morning and told him I'd take Nunavut. Start date March, not February. He complained for 30 seconds and agreed, because I was right that February conditions were worse, and he knew it. When I told Verity, she was quiet for a moment. Then, March. March. That's 3.5 months. Less than Churchill. She nodded, like she was doing the calculation and finding it survivable. I'll water your basil, she said. You don't have to. I know, I'll do it anyway. She looked at me, and you'll text me when you land. Both times. Both times. When I flew out for the Nunavut shoot, Verity didn't come to the airport. That was my call. I hate airport goodbyes in a way I can't fully explain. The fluorescent lights, the way everyone is performing composure, and she knew that about me. She did come by the apartment the morning of my flight, with 2 coffees from the place on King Street that does it properly, and she sat on the kitchen counter while I did the final equipment check, asking me questions about focal lengths she didn't entirely need the answers to. At the door, she held out a small envelope. Open it on the plane, she said. What is it? Evidence that I can be normal about this. That sounds unlikely. It is largely fake. On the plane, I opened it. Inside was a print she'd made. A photo of the spare room, taken sometime in the weeks I'd been in Churchill, sunlight across the new desk, the prints on the wall visible, the room that used to be nothing now clearly, the room of someone who intended to come back to it. On the back in her handwriting, come home to this, I'll be in it. I kept that print in my chest pocket for the entire Nunavut shoot. March is brutal on Baffin Island. The work was extraordinary, the kind of cold that rearranges your understanding of what cold means. I sent back images that Hennessy called the best of my career, which he has never said before and will probably not say again for several years, because that is how Hennessy operates. Every evening I called Verity. Real calls, sometimes short. Once for 2 hours while she was trying to assemble a bookshelf and I was allegedly helping from 4,000 kilometers away by asking unhelpful questions about the instructions. She threatened to block me internationally. I told her to look at Step 7 again. Step 7 was the problem. I was right. She did not concede this verbally, but she kept going. I flew home in late March on the first clear afternoon I'd had since February. Kingston from the air is not dramatic the way the North is dramatic. It's river and islands and small, orderly streets and that particular light of early spring when the snow is mostly gone, but nothing is green yet. It looked exactly like somewhere I was going to land. Verity was in the arrivals area holding a piece of cardboard. She'd written on it with a marker, "Welcome home, professionally reckless man." The woman standing next to her had read it and looked concerned. I walked straight to her and dropped my bag. That sign is a lot, I said. I workshopped it. What were the rejected versions? You don't want to know. I kissed her there, in front of the arrivals board, and the concerned woman, and whoever else was in the Kingston airport, on a Tuesday in late March. She hit my shoulder lightly when I pulled back. I regret the sign. No, you don't. She grinned. No, I don't. Our first official date was that Friday. A small Italian place on Princess Street with good candles and menus that hadn't been updated since 2017. We ordered too much, talked about nothing important for an hour, then talked about everything important for 2 more. She told me about the client she'd finally fired. I told her about Baffin Island in a way I hadn't told anyone yet. When the bill came, she reached for it. I got there first. "Don't make this a thing," she said. "I ate your soup for free." That was different. "You made it under unclear circumstances." It was entirely clear. "You were holding spackle." She laughed. I kept the bill. Walking home, she held my arm against the chill that had come back in late March the way it always does in Kingston, stubbornly, like a guest who won't read the room. She was wearing the Grey Queen's hoodie. I noticed and said nothing, and intended to never say anything. At my door, she stopped. "I want to see the room again," she said, "now that you've been back in it." We went upstairs. I turned on the lamp she'd chosen. The room glowed the same warm way it had that first day, but different now, because I'd been in it for a month. There were new prints tacked to the corkboard, notes from the Unifut shoot, 2 contact sheets from Baffin I was still working through. It looked like a room someone was using. Verity stood by the desk and looked at the boardwalk print above it. "I think about what I'd have done," she said, "if you'd come home on the 28th like you were supposed to, if it had all been finished and ready." She looked over her shoulder at me. "Whether I'd have had the nerve to tell you." "Would you have?" She was quiet for a second. "I'd have told you about the room," she said, "and I'd have hoped you'd figure out the rest." That's a lot of faith in my perceptive abilities. "You're a photographer." Photographers miss things, not things they want to see. She said it simply like a fact. "You kept that role for 8 months, you knew." She was right. I had known. I'd just been waiting for a version of events where it was safe to land. She had given me that version. I stepped past her to the desk and opened the top drawer. I'd put something in there the week I got back from Nunavut. I hadn't been entirely sure what I was going to do with it. Now I was sure. I held it out to her. A print, the best frame from that 8-month-old roll. The boardwalk in March, early light. Her, not the one on the wall. A slightly different moment, 2 frames later. Her, turning just slightly, the beginning of looking back over her shoulder, coffee cup still raised. On the back I'd written 5 words. She looked at them for a long moment. I was already looking back. When she looked up, she wasn't trying to hold her expression steady anymore. "That's good," she said quietly. "That's very good. I had time to think in Nunavut. It's quiet up there." She laughed and it caught in her throat. I put my arms around her and she leaned in the way she had that first day in the kitchen, when the weight of weeks apart finally had somewhere to go. Outside, Kingston went about its evening. Cars on Princess Street. Someone walking a dog on the block below. The St. Lawrence somewhere south of us, the way it always was, going where it was always going. I had been somewhere between leaving and landing for most of my adult life. That evening, in the room she had made for me, I was just home. 8 months later, she moved in. Not impulsively. We talked about it properly, the adult way, which took 3 weeks longer than it needed to, because we're both people who think things through to the point of diminishing returns. She brought her drafting table and her good lamp, and the print of the harbor in winter I'd told her she could have. I made room, willingly, the kind of making room that doesn't feel like loss. Murray came by to help with the heavy furniture, and stayed for dinner, and was smug about the whole situation for exactly as long as you'd expect from a man who had installed a photo and said, "That's a good one, kid." The Baffin Island series ran in a national conservation magazine the following spring. Hennessy called it a career-defining body of work, which he has never said before and may not say again. Verity read the feature at her desk and sent me a photo of the open magazine with a single text, "Told you." I proposed in January. Not an anniversary, not a special occasion, a Thursday evening. We were in the studio. That's what we called the spare room by then. She was working on a rebrand for a client. I was going through selects from a recent assignment. I had thought about doing something considered. A specific place, a planned moment, something she could tell the story of. What actually happened was, I looked up from my screen, and she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, with her laptop, in my hoodie again, hair up. the way she always worked when she was concentrating. And I thought about the parking lot in January, 2 years before, and the cables, and the coffee that was supposed to be 20 minutes. I got up and got the box from where I'd had it for 6 weeks. She looked up when I crossed the room, looked at the box, looked at me. Thursday, she said. Thursday. You couldn't even wait for a weekend? Apparently not. She was already crying before I got to the question. She told me to ask it anyway, for the record, and she said yes before I finished the sentence, and then said yes again. After, properly, the way she does things. We were married the following October, small, the right size. I still travel. The work still takes me places. I've been to Labrador and Haida Gwaii and northern Quebec in the time since Verity moved in, and once to Iceland on a long lens wildlife project that was cold in a different way than Churchill, but still very cold. Each time, she stands in the parking lot with 2 coffees from King Street and asks questions about focal lengths she doesn't need the answers to. Each time I text her when I land, both times. And each time I come back to Kingston, to the apartment we've made into something that holds both of us, she's there, in my hoodie, in the kitchen, or at her drafting table, or standing in the studio looking at the boardwalk print, with the particular expression she gets when she's thinking about something she hasn't said yet. The last time I came home, she was standing at the window in the early morning, coffee in both hands, looking out at the street. She didn't know I was awake yet. I got my camera. The frame is on the wall now, beside the one she put there. 2 photographs of the same person, years apart in similar light. The second one knows it's being taken. She's smiling at the window. If someone had told me, in that parking lot in January, in the 28 degrees Celsius, and the dead battery and the uncertainty, that all I needed was to stop being so prepared to leave, I probably wouldn't have believed them. I'd have thanked the woman with the jumper cables, though. That part, I was always going to get right.